Hello? Have you ever wanted to publish a successful book? I have. It's been a dream of mine ever since I was a little kid. In fact, when I was 7 years old, I was sitting at my desk, minding my business, when I was suddenly struck by a brilliant idea. I grabbed a pen and paper and illustrated what I fully believed would become the greatest superhero of all time. And it is awesome. Now, I brought that illustration, the original, with me today, and I just want to know, are you prepared to see it? Okay. I named it Dogman. Why are you laughing? Okay, well, I got a full-color example right here. Oh, yeah, that's the stuff. Yeah, that's good. And when I saw this, I was so enthralled by the image that I came up with this whole story, and I instantly wanted it to become this best-selling novel. So I began writing. And you can see this is a really gripping opening when I was 12 years old. A cold and bitter day it was. I mean, that's, wow, who wouldn't want to read more than that? So when I was writing this, I actually worked on this manuscript until I was 21, believe it or not. And when it was done, I sent it to a number of publishers. Now, strangely enough, I only heard back from one of those publishers. And they were very polite, but told me that essentially they couldn't publish my story because they didn't know my name. And that's when I started to learn a very depressing truth about publishing a book. Because of the fact that there are millions of books already out there and that hundreds of thousands of books are published every year, it's becoming increasingly difficult for aspiring authors to publish a book and stand out. In fact, according to Steve Parasanti of Barrett Kohler Publishers, a book has less than a 1% chance of being stocked in the average bookstore. Now, when I received this rejection, I thought, well, what am I going to do? I mean, how can an aspiring author compete? So I did the only thing I could do. I gave up, right? I mean, you saw the images. It was just a dream, right? It was just the kind of goofy little dream that I had. And so I buried the story under a pile of papers and did my best to forget about it. Clearly, it wasn't going to happen for me. But I still loved books, and so I took an internship at a publishing company in San Francisco. And while I was there, I worked in the editorial department, looking through the slush pile. These are unsolicited manuscripts that are sent to us by aspiring authors. And as I was looking through the cover letters of these various manuscripts, I noticed a similar trend among all of these authors. All of the authors were extremely willing to aggressively promote their book after it was published. I mean, once they had that stamp of approval, once they had that book, they would become marketing machines. They would drive across the country, they would write articles, they would blog about it, they would call someone who knew Oprah. I mean, they would do everything they had to do to promote this book once it was published. And I was talking about this with my boss, Jeevan, and he said, aspiring authors have it all backwards. They should be doing all of these things before their book is published. He then said something that has changed my life. He said, books don't create movements, movements create books. We're tempted to think that a best-selling novel is like some random bolt of lightning from the sky that strikes the earth and starts this best-selling bonfire. And while that certainly can happen, while some people do get lucky and this book just comes out and starts that best-selling bonfire, most of these fires are actually started by the movement of authors beforehand. And when I learned this, I started studying the lives of famous authors. I wanted to see if I could find that movement, what they had done to create a successful movement behind their book before it came out. It was then that I stumbled across a kind of formula for creating a successful movement. And I will share with you 3 steps from that formula. Number 1, Collaborate with others. Now, this is true of any movement, but it's especially true of creating a successful movement behind a book. And I think that there's no greater example of collaboration than Benjamin Franklin. And the guy knew how to collaborate with people. In fact, when he was 21 years old, he organized a group called Junto. And this was a group of successful businessmen who got together and exchanged ideas about politics and successful business tips, and even shared their own personal libraries with each other. And Benjamin Franklin, 21 years old, soaks it up like a sponge. He then went on to help inspire a really great movement in American history, and that movement inspired some really well-known documents of its own. The Declaration of Independence, and later, the Constitution of the United States. Now, Benjamin Franklin's signature is on both of these documents, and in fact, he was on the committee of 5 people that drafted the Declaration of Independence. He learned about collaboration early in his life, and it proved very successful later. Step number 2, use the resources and opportunities that are available to you. Now, Mark Twain was brilliant at this. In fact, his fuel for traveling was opportunities. He took every small opportunity he could to travel. And everywhere he traveled, he would write and speak about his travels. And then he would get more opportunities to go and write and speak. In fact, he wrote and spoke so much while he traveled that researchers are having a very difficult time collaborating gathering all of his writings into one place, because he wrote and spoke so much. In fact, researchers are still finding new works by Mark Twain in obscure newspapers. Now, we have the opportunity to travel the world just like Mark Twain, and we don't even have to leave our desk. Social media has made it incredibly easy for us to connect with millions, if not billions, of people around the world for free. And that's a resource that Mark Twain did not have, and we have it. Step number 3, write fearlessly, especially if you are afraid. Well, this one's a really sensitive one for me, because a lot of authors prevent themselves from writing because they're either afraid that someone's going to criticize what they have to say, or perhaps their writing is too personal or too controversial to share. And if that's how you feel about your writing and your words, then I would introduce you to a hero of mine. His name is Frederick Douglass. In 1838, Frederick Douglass escaped slavery. He then joined the abolition movement. If anyone had reason to be afraid of writing and speaking something, it was him. And yet, 20 years before the outbreak of the Civil War, Frederick Douglass published his autobiography. The book became so popular that he had to leave the country because there was a fear that his former master might try to reclaim him as property. But thank God he wrote, because the world is a better place for his writing. Yes, there are reasons to be afraid of sharing your words or speaking or writing, but if your words can add value to the life of another human being, then you should write them. So those are my 3 steps in that formula. And in 2012, I decided to experiment with this myself. I wanted to see if I could create a movement behind an idea. And so, number 1, I began collaborating with some really talented people. We seemed to rally behind this idea that our lives are better and more meaningful if we can help people move forward through difficult times. That's the movement we wanted to create. We wanted to help people move forward. And so, number 2, we used the resources that were available to us. Not much, but we started with a blog. And we worked by assignment to, number 3, write fearlessly. A lot of people shared experiences that were deeply personal to them, but the driving principle was to help people move forward. About a year into managing this blog, I wrote an article called "Marriage Isn't for You." In a nutshell, the article was about some advice that my dad had given to me. It was right before I got married. He said, essentially, "Seth, stop being so selfish. Marriage isn't for you. It's not just about you. It's about the person you're marrying. You have to make this about them as well. And I wrote that article. It was a very personal thing, and I published it. Within a week, the article had gone viral. It got 24 million hits and was translated into over 20 languages. And I remember my wife and I were interviewed on several news programs, and one of the reporters called it luck. And you know, certainly in some ways it was luck. But that luck wouldn't have been possible had I not been trying to consciously build a movement that supported the idea. Had I not been collaborating with talented people, using what resources we had available to us, or writing without fear. Immediately after the blog post went viral, I got an email from a publisher, and they offered me a book deal. And it was the same publisher that had projected my book. If you want success in your writing, I would encourage you to try to build your own movement. Because while movements create books, you create that movement. Thank you.